Good afternoon, Elizabeth Clor. Welcome to RunChats with Ron Runs NYC. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Happy Sunday, and thanks for jumping on with me. I thought it'd be great for us to get together with Boston registration coming up in 2 days. I thought it'd be perfect for us to have a chat.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, sometimes the timing in life works out, right? I mean, sometimes we scramble to make it all fit, and then sometimes it actually just comes together easily. So thanks for working with me
Absolutely.
so quickly. So mostly, pretty much every show, we just start with a little introduction. Like, tell the Run Chats audience, like, where did you grow up? What was life like growing up? And kind of when did you first get your introduction into sports?
Sure. So I grew up in Fairfax County, Virginia. I still live there today, so born and raised. And I went to college at the University of Virginia. So I've lived in Virginia my whole life. What was life like growing up? Well, I was really into dance. My mother was a dance teacher, and since the age of 3, she would be teaching dance classes, and I would be like running around the dance studio. So I had a lot of exposure to that at a very young age. So I was taking, probably three dance classes a week, all throughout the elementary school, middle school, high school. In high school, I joined the dance team, which was my kind of athletic thing. At the same time, I was also really interested in theater, drama, music, singing, all of that as well. So I kind of had a dual interest in high school and was involved in both of those. But dance is actually sort of close to theater because it's all about performing and things like that. Um, but I didn't do any kind of the more traditional sports. I didn't do running or soccer or basketball or anything like that in high school. And then in college, kind of same thing. Um, I there weren't a lot of opportunities to dance. They at UVA now they have a dance team. They didn't have that while I was there. So while I was in college, to keep active, I did step aerobics actually. That was kind of my favorite thing to do to keep active, just to sort of feel like I was doing something since I wasn't really dancing as much in college. And really, I was kind of like dancing, right? Sort of like stepping up and down. There's choreography. There's a little bit of skill involved. So I really enjoyed that. And then I didn't start running until after college when I was, I guess, 22 years old. And I had never ever run like, everyone in high school or most everyone in the public schools that is does that mile where you got to run a mile around the track. I don't know if they still do it, but we all had to do that. And I always dreaded that. Like for weeks, I would dread the mile. But I was actually not bad at it. And I think that was only because I was so afraid of it that I would start off running really slowly. Everyone else would like bolt out and they'd be sprinting out, and I'd be like, to me, that was like a marathon. So I would start slowly. And I would say, I think I ran about like an 8:30, which was considered good for someone who doesn't run ever. Um, so let's see, how did I get involved into running? So after college, then there was sort of really no more activities there. The sort of step aerobics went away, kind of. So then I joined a gym, and lo and behold, they had step aerobics as well. When was this? This was, I'm going to date myself here. This was, I graduated college in the year 2000, and I joined the gym in the fall of 2000. And step aerobics was still really big then. And I went to this class religiously every Tuesday and Thursday night, and I loved it. But I had this expensive membership and I didn't have a lot of money at the time. So I wanted to get my use out of the membership. So if it wasn't Tuesday or Thursday and it wasn't step, I figured I would use like the other gym equipment. And that's when I discovered the treadmill. Ding, ding, ding. And I think the first time I hopped on, I wanted to try to run a mile to see how fast I could do it. I think I set the treadmill at like 5.5, which is maybe like a 10:30-ish pace or something. And I was able to do it, but it was very, very, very challenging. And so the thing I liked about it was that, and this is kind of my personality, was that you could actually set a goal. It was very numbers. You had your time and you had your distance. So this was something that I could work towards. So every time I would go to the gym and it wasn't step aerobics, I would try to either run faster or run farther, usually not both at the same time.
Good, because that could have been an injury prescription.
Yeah. Exactly. So it wasn't long before, I mean, I think it probably took like 3 months to get myself up to like 4, maybe 5 miles. And I was doing that at like, I'm gonna say like a 6.5, 9-minute mile for that. And then I was this gym rat. I did the step aerobics classes ultimately ended. That person stopped, they stopped offering them. But I'd use all the machines. I'd go like literally 5, 6 times a week. I'd use all the weight machines and I would run every time I went. So I was running 5 or 6 times a week on a treadmill. And I would probably do, I want to say like 5 or 6 miles. Um, each time I did, it was also kind of about burning the calories for me back then. In my early 20s, I didn't really have a great idea of sort of what was healthy for me. And I just thought the more calories I could burn, the better. It honestly sort of went hand in hand with an eating disorder that I developed. All of this kind of developed at the same time when I started eating less, which I thought was healthier to eat less. All the fitness magazines at the time focused on cut your calories, eat fewer calories. They didn't really distinguish weight loss with from health. And my goal was to be healthy, but everything I was reading was telling me that in order to be healthy, you have to eat less calories. And sort of perfectionist, goal-oriented person that I am, I kind of fell into the fewer calories I eat, the better. The more calories I burn, the better. The less I weigh, the better. And I mean, I knew, once I got down to really low weight and I realized I couldn't stop and I realized that all I did was think about food, I realized this was a problem. But I didn't realize this was a problem until it was kind of consuming me, for lack of a better word. So, I developed this eating disorder when I was 20, 22, 23. It's a hard time. I mean, I don't think, in society, we really talk enough about that transition between college and being thrust into the real world, where you're essentially, in college, your society is there for you. You have clubs, you have goals, you have your classes, everything is structured for you. And then you're set free into the world and there's no structure, there's no sororities, there's no social life. You can live where you want to do, wherever you want to have whatever job, and it's scary, and it's an amazing time, but if you're not prepared for it, it can be very difficult making that adjustment. And for me, it was difficult not having all of that structure and kind of not really knowing what to do with my life other than to have the job that I had. And not having like goals, not trying to get a good grade, not trying to graduate. Like, what was my goal? What was my purpose? And my career was fine. It just wasn't totally satisfying that need. So all of this kind of coming together at the same time was just the perfect storm for anorexia. And I fell right into it. So I suffered from that, sort of at my like peaking at it for maybe 2 years when it was pretty serious, all throughout. I want to say like 2001, 2002, 2003 is sort of when I tried to get help for it. But with the running on the treadmill, I actually did enjoy that. It wasn't kind of like a punishment for what I ate. I would actually, I loved the fact that I was able to run. And at this point I was running a lot faster. I was running 6 or 7 miles. I could do it at like a 8:30 pace instead of a 9:30. And I really loved that. So while I wanted to recover from the eating disorder, I did not want to become unfit. I wanted to maintain the running, but it was kind of all entangled in there. So I had to sort of work to separate the two out. So that's how I got into running. And I did that I was like the gym rat treadmill runner for like 5 years. So I graduated college in 2000 and I sort of discovered the racing world in 2005. That whole time, it never dawned on me to do like a 5K. I don't think racing was as big back then. Not, you just didn't hear about people doing it as often. Marathoning, half marathons weren't as popular. And so I just kind of, it just didn't really cross my mind or seem like something that I wanted to do until I went to my 5-year college reunion, and there was a 2-mile race for people. And my roommate, who I was there with, my college roommate, the two of us went together. She said, "Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this race that I just found in the program instead of going to the gym?" Because of course I had planned to go to the gym while I was there. And I said, "Yeah, that might be a nice change from the gym and it might be fun. Okay, I'll do this 2-mile race." And had never having raced before, I got there, and then there was this guy that was also in my graduating class, and he was like a runner, like he did races and marathons and everything. And so I started chatting with him. The race started, and we just started chatting, and we ran this 2-mile race. And when it was done, they like handed me this cup trophy thing, and they said, "You're the female winner." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" I didn't even know that, because I was just chatting it up with this guy. And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And then the guy that I was running with, he's also from the Northern Virginia area. And he told me that there was a 10K in Washington, D.C., like a big 10K. It was the Lawyers Have Heart 10K, and it was going to be the following weekend. And I said, "Well, how long is a 10K? I didn't even know." And he said, 6.2 miles, and it's in DC, and there's going to be a lot of lawyers there. And, I was single at the time. I'm like, "Oh, maybe I could meet someone." That was kind of my motivation at the time. So I figured I do like 6-7 miles on the treadmill all the time. And this was fun. So that should be fun. So I did it. And this was like a huge race, much different from the little 2-miler. We got the little chip in your shoe. There was like, I don't know, 2,000 runners. It was big. And it was hot out. And I show up in my cotton shorts and cotton tank top, and I don't use the bathroom beforehand, which ended up being a problem. And I'm just a total rookie at this race. The pictures from it are pretty hysterical, but I had never run that hard because, I wanted to, it was a race. It was how hard can you do it? And plus, that was also sort of like my max that I would do would probably be 7. So it's kind of like I hadn't really ever run much farther than that. And I was trying to run it really fast, and it was hot. So I did that, and I loved it. And then I checked the results afterwards, and I sort of compared sort of where I was, and I was in like the top 20% of women. And of course I was like, "Ooh, being competitive, like that's pretty good." And so then from there, it just kind of escalated. I just was like, well, if I can do a 10K, maybe I could do a half marathon. And so from there, I did a half marathon. My first half marathon was the Rock and Roll Virginia Beach in 2005, which was just a few months later. Yeah, and man, that half marathon hurt too. And that was also a hot one, but I ran that half. My goal was 2 hours, and I got 2 hours exactly. So that was my first half. And then from there, I had a friend that she said that she was going to do a marathon in May of 2006, and she had never done one before, and the two of us were about the same level. So I said, "Well, if she thinks she can do one, there's no reason why I couldn't also try to do it." So we did it together, and we signed up for the Delaware Marathon in May of 2006, which was, she had chosen it. So people are like, "Why Delaware?" It's like, well, that's what she had chosen, and it was close, and it was flat, and it was actually a really good one to be my first, and I really enjoyed it. And I ran a 4:46, and when I was done, I was like hooked. I had the bug. And so from 2006 till now, marathoning has been my thing.
That is a great, I mean, that may be the longest start to your beginnings all the way through up to your first marathon, but I absolutely love it. So we got to work our way all the way back, because you gave me so much in there, and I want to make sure we spend a little time on each step. So
Sure.
cheers for step aerobics, man. So, I remember that whole phase, and they were great workouts, man. I mean, people were in there doing their thing. Awesome. And, you got your start in dance and, carried it through, and were really involved with that, which is super cool. and your first run is on the track like in high school, and 8:30 is really good for like a high school mile when you're not a runner and you've never done it before, because you weren't doing your whole step thing at this point. So that was a pretty cool, like first toe in the water situation. I appreciate you sharing your struggles with food and anorexia. I had a guest on who actually won the virtual Boston Marathon this year, and she talked extensively about her struggles with food and anorexia and how it really wrecked her college running career and a lot of relationships, and just put her into such stressful situations with her family and other members. And I just appreciated so much how open she was on all of it. And now she's a mom of two, and I think they're having their third, and she won the Boston virtual. I mean, she ran her
Amazing.
PR, she ran a great time. She has it like all together, and it just makes me happy to see that people can come through such a difficult experience like that and come out of it and be so healthy. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit, because you already shared that part to start with, like
Yeah.
what helped you eventually like work your way through that and move forward? Because obviously today, you're strong, you're healthy, you're a terrific runner, you look healthy. Obviously you've got that all completely not only sorted, but way, way beyond you in the past. But these things that are in our past can sometimes come back. So
Yeah.
anything that you can share with anybody about how you managed to pull through that and get through that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. I went to multiple therapists when I first started. Had to admit to myself I couldn't deny it anymore that I had anorexia. I went to a therapist who I worked with for a year and just was not at all helpful. Who just wanted to talk about my father and my childhood and just dig deep, and none of it went anywhere. um, I went on to online support forums trying to understand how other people were recovering. Um, and it didn't really work. I mean, I sort of, the reason I wanted to recover was because I was a perfectionist, and as a perfectionist I couldn't have an eating disorder. So it's like, well, I got to recover from that, obviously. So I was kind of at war with myself. The kind of breakthrough that I had was after a year of like being with a therapist, realizing that it wasn't work. I kind of just said, you know what, what's real about me is I actually like this eating disorder. I'm going through a hard time in my life for other reasons. When I have it, I feel numb. It makes me, it's a way to cope. I use it. I want to lose a lot of weight. And I kind of relapsed back down to a really low weight. And I kind of want to say I sort of embraced it. And I just let myself be anorexic, which I know kind of sounds bad, but for me, it looked like a step backward, but it was actually a step forward because I had never allowed myself to be imperfect and to just be okay with it and to just sort of let myself do something that I knew was wrong or bad for me. So I kind of got that out of my system, and then I was at a low weight again, and I had all the symptoms of being cold all the time, hungry, and I'm like, okay, now I really actually want to recover, not because I should, but because this sucks, like living like this, always always just being hungry and just not having a life other than thinking about food. It really just, when you have anorexia, it's all encompassing. You can't enjoy life. All you do is think about what your next meal is going to be. So so anyway, so this was, I guess, around 2004 time frame. So what really helped me start to recover was that was also that 2005 was kind of when I got into racing, and I decided that I really wanted to, I was going to train for a marathon. I needed to fuel for it. And I started running more, and I kind of just let go of the need to be a certain weight. I stopped weighing myself. I started focusing on eating healthy. And even though I still didn't want to gain weight or be heavy, I mean, I know that I did. I just didn't weigh myself and focus on it. So my focus just shifted over to running. But what's interesting is that even though I recovered physically and I went along, 2000, by probably around 2007 ish, I was running marathons, eating pretty much normally. Things seemed kind of back to normal. I didn't really ever address that underlying perfectionism that much. And that's really what drove it, was sort of needing to prove myself to myself and to other people, really caring about what other people thought of me. And those issues were still there, but instead of being focused on this unhealthy eating disorder, it was all focused on something that was seemingly healthier and more positive, which was marathon running. So I kind of just pushed all of that into running, which created its own problems later on down the line. So I continued running marathons, 2006, 2007, 2008. I met my husband in 2009. His name is Greg. And we got married in 2010. And that helped sort of normalize my eating even more because I don't cook. I don't really know how to cook. And usually my dinners were like, put a Boca burger in the microwave some chicken nuggets, have some oatmeal, have some cereal. So even though I was, eating enough calories, it wasn't the healthiest just because I wasn't like a cook and I didn't really have anyone to share the meal with. So I didn't really go to the trouble. So, so we were married in 2010 and at the time, he had also just been getting into running. So it was something that we could share together. And he ran his first big race, which was like the Army 10 miler in 2010, shortly after we got married. And I still had like kind of all these underlying issues that didn't really come out until I tried to qualify for Boston, which kind of brings us on to the next topic. And that is when these issues all surfaced again, when I was trying and trying and trying, and I wanted it so badly, and I couldn't do it. And this perfectionism came out in the form of, if I didn't do well at a race, if I didn't get it, I would go into like this deep depression. I would cry. The sport started becoming not fun for me. It just became all about proving it. And I felt like I had to prove it to myself and prove it to the rest of the world, who I always felt like everyone was judging me because I was insecure. And so those issues were really prevalent kind of in the 2010, 2011, 2012 timeframe, which is when I had the fitness based on my other race times. I had the fitness to run a BQ, which at that time was a 340. They hadn't lowered the standards yet. I had the fitness to do a 340 based on all my other races and my training. It was just mentally, I had these issues. It was this vicious cycle. So I wanted it so badly that every time I would go to run the marathon, my mind would just get in the way of it. I was so anxious and nervous and I wanted it so bad that didn't matter how fit I was or how trained I was. When you have anxiety, it will raise your heart rate and it will literally make you feel like your easy pace is your marathon pace. So I would go run marathon pace for like 8 miles. And then at mile 9, I'd be like, oh, I'm done. Couldn't do it anymore. Whereas in training, I could run that pace for quite longer. And in training, I could run half marathons at like way faster than that pace, but couldn't do it because of the anxiety. And it all just stems back from the same thing that the eating disorder stemmed from, which was perfectionism and just caring too much about what other people think.
That's really powerful stuff. And so it wasn't just affecting you with the eating disorder, but it's basically submarining, your running, racing efforts, even though you're super fit and have performed and done key workouts and things that show you're capable of doing X. But when the actual race would come to be, whatever that race was, you just couldn't, you couldn't do it because, as you said, with anxiety, it's basically like, somebody's heart rate and their pulse rate goes way up and they're having trouble breathing, because of anxiety. And, somebody puts a brown paper bag over them, when they're hyperventilating. And it seems like that would be the most ridiculous thing to do to get somebody to calm down and start breathing normally, but it works. And in this case, it's in your own mind. It's nothing really about physical. It's there. But this is something that tons and tons of people struggle with, not only in running, but in every single facet of their life. So this is really powerful stuff. So where did you take it from there once you kind of made these discoveries?
Yeah. And the interesting thing is too, when you're a beginner at something, when you're new, it's kind of like the honeymoon phase, because when I ran my marathon in 2006, and it was a 4:46, and then I ran the next one and it was a 4:24, and I'm like, whoa, 20-minute PR. And then the next one was like, I want to say like a 4:11. When you're just starting out, like PRs just, they come like so easy because you have a lot of gains to make, and you have a lot of untapped potential. But as soon as I put a goal like, um, I want Boston, and I started taking it, I didn't really take it that serious back then. I mean, I wanted to PR, but I kind of took for granted that I was just always PRing. I just kind of thought, oh, this is running, it's great, you're always getting faster. But there comes an end to that, and it's always hard to qualify for Boston for anyone at any level. Um, and as soon as I put that out there as the goal, and it wasn't happening for me, and I wasn't even setting PRs. Like, I think my PR from like 2008 was a 3:51, and then for years I couldn't even get under that 3:51. So it wasn't even like I was, oh, 3:45, you're halfway there. Like, no, I would just bonk. So how did I get out of it? Well, after running multiple marathons and having these like major crash and burns, I realized that it was anxiety, and particularly I ran the Milwaukee Lakefront marathon in the fall, and this marathon was perfectly flat. It had perfect weather. I had just set a PR like in the 8K that was like super fast. I had just run all these super fast workouts. I was in the best shape of my life, and I get there, and like by mile 8, I'm done. And that was an eye opener for me. And I realized that I needed to kind of, quote unquote, get better, and get help, because I was just going to keep training. Like, didn't matter how hard I trained, this race anxiety was going to get in the way. So in 2012, I realized, I sort of talked to a bunch of people, and I got a referral for a sports psychologist who could help me work through some of these issues. And the two like eating disorder therapists I had been to before, the first one I think I told you about did nothing. The second one was even more useless. Just and not only that, she would say things to me that I found offensive, and so I kind of didn't think therapy was, after two bad experiences, was for me. But this person came highly recommended, and I think the great thing about this was that there was something to apply it to, like concrete. Like, you can go run a race, or you can go train, and you can talk about how did you feel, versus just like the ambiguity of like, go live life and talk about your life. You had something that you can apply it to. And they say, running can teach you so much. And I think it's because it is concrete, and it is an experience that you can document. And I've been an avid blogger for years now, and we can get into that later. But having that experience that you can document and you can break down and you can analyze really helps you talk about your emotions and your feelings in a concrete way, that if you don't have that, it's just a lot more vague. So I went to start seeing this sports psychologist in 2012. And, I knew it was going to kind of be a long journey. So I saw him every week. I never missed a session. And he had me do sort of exercises of, after you do a run, talk, think about what went well, what didn't went well, be a lot more neutral. He gave me homework every time. I kept a journal of the homework, and everything that he said made sense kind of from an intellectual level. And my husband, Greg, would be telling me the same things that this guy was saying. And then logically, yes, it all made sense, but I wasn't like emotionally feeling it. It's like, I know that my value as a person is not tied to my marathon PR. And I know that other people aren't judging me because I have not qualified for Boston. And I know that's not true, but I still felt like people were judging me. And I still felt like I was like failing in life because I hadn't qualified for Boston, but I was running all these miles. So I went through therapy, and I detail all of this in my book, Boston Bound, which we can also get to later. But we talked about a lot of things, like for being like more focusing on the process instead of focusing on the outcome. Like, stop focusing on that 340 and that number. Like, yes, that's the goal, but if you focus on other things and have other goals that are not related to a time, but like, what's your race strategy? What's your approach here? what are some other goals that have nothing to do with your time, that if you complete those goals, you can feel good about them? What can you control? What can't you control? You can't control the weather. You can't control if you end up getting injured. I mean, you kind of can, but not always. So we kind of just broke everything down. What can you control? What can't you control? What are your process goals? What are your outcome goals? People aren't really actually judging you the way you think. So there's just all these concepts that he just kind of hit me on the head with it every single time. And I would go in there and I would talk about my training for the week, or if I ran a race, I'd talk about my race. And whenever he heard me going down this path of kind of negativity, of like not liking my time or whatever, he would like call it out. So so he'd like hit me on the head with it. So he basically, conditioned me to be able to identify those thoughts myself. And just ultimately become a lot more neutral about it, and just kind of take the emotion out of running. And I mean, I know there's a lot of joy to be had, and a lot of us are really passionate about running and everything, and I think that's great, and I continue to be passionate about it. But you can be passionate about it and you can really want it without having it be such an emotional thing that's like tied to yourself. One of the things he told me was that you should see yourself as a person who runs, not as a runner. Because if you think of yourself as a runner, then your whole identity becomes tangled up in it. If you just think of yourself as a person. And I didn't really have a great sense of self, and I didn't realize this until, what was I now at this point, like 35 years old. I didn't realize that I didn't really know what I liked about myself, or I didn't really know how I valued myself. I was always like a straight A student. I had my dance, I had all these things that were like externally validating. And as long as I was exceeding those, I was liking myself. But if not, then I was like hating myself. So I started to try to think about, well, what makes me me? And then I realized it was my drive, my dedication, my compassion toward others. The fact that at my heart, I was a good person, doing good things. Didn't have to be some great achiever to be a good person, and actually being a good person is much more important than achieving like amazing things. And I just sort of never realized that. So I had to come to that conclusion. So kind of fast forwarding, we had all these sessions, and I had a real breakthrough moment in, I want to say, a little bit over a year after I was working with him in 2013, when I was injured, and I was registered to run the 2013 Chicago Marathon. And I was thinking to myself, I was recovering from injury, and I knew that the marathon was like in 7 weeks, and I knew that I could get up to 26 miles safely in that time. So the question was, do I go and run it and run like a slower time that's not going to be a PR because I'm not that well trained, or do I just like bag it? And I was kind of going back and forth on what I wanted to do. And then that hit me, was that, wait a minute, like I've wanted to run Chicago for a really long time. Chicago is a really fun race. I want to do it. What's stopping me? And what was stopping me was that, oh, my time might be slow. Oh, what are people going to think? They're going to think that like I'm a 4-hour marathoner again. And I caught myself, and that was the first time I was able to catch it. And I was like, wait a minute, this line of thinking is hurting me. It's not helping me. I'm self-limiting. I'm taking an opportunity away from myself because I care about what other people think, and I'm valuing my time. So I said, screw the time. I'm going to go to Chicago. I've wanted to run it for years. I'm registered for it. Greg is registered for it. We're going to go. I'm just going to run it, and I'll train for it. Like I have 6 whatever weeks to train. I'll do my best, and that's all I can do. And I'm going to be happy with it. So I did that, and I had no pressure to PR or run a certain time. And the irony of it is, even though I wasn't in like the best shape, I still set like, I think like a 30-second PR. And I wasn't even trying to PR. And I was like, wow, amazing. This was my first PR in like years, out of shape. And it was only because I went into that race like so relaxed, so chill. And that was my turning point.
That's awesome. Because you had to come to that realization on your own. So Greg, saying the same things as your therapist, it doesn't mean that you don't care about what your husband says. Of course you do. You love him. You married him. He's a great guy, but it's just, it doesn't, it can be your brother. It can be your sister. It can be somebody you train and run miles with. It can be Greg McMillan from McMillan Running. It, whoever it is, they all care about you. They all want you to succeed, but there is a difference there with a therapist. And I'm really happy that you had the two experiences that weren't positive at all on the food side, and that, you know, you stuck with it on the sports psychologist side, because it is a shame that, you know, with all the schooling that therapists go through, the profound impact they can have on somebody for good or for bad. And this goes to couples that are going through awful divorces or painful separations and loss of a child. I mean, any, you know, profound losses that people experience, alcoholism, drugs, things that we need counseling and therapy for. If you find the right person and they connect with you and understand what's going on, they can change your whole life. And you know, it hit you with Chicago, and I'm just so happy that you realized it and you talked about it so now, so clearly right now, because yes, nobody cares about the times we run. That's the truth. And when I say nobody, of course your husband cares, of course your best friends care, but all your Instagram followers don't care what time you run. They don't. You know, they might say they do, and they're going to comment because they want to chime in on a post and they want to say something. And whatever that something is that they say doesn't define who you are or me or anyone else that's out there in the world of social. And it can have hugely positive effects, but it can have negative effects if you allow it to. But in this case, that was your turning point, because it wasn't in a session with your therapist. He didn't tell you that. You recognized it, that you'd wanted to run that course. You wanted to go do it. You were signed up, you and Greg. And even when you weren't in your best of shape, you went, you rolled the dice, and you found out something, like after not running a PR for a while and, you know, being stuck, even though it's 30 seconds is still a win. But way more importantly, you recognized what the issue was.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, you think about the reverse. I have so many friends that are runners. If they run a slower time, if they don't hit their goal, am I going to not like them, or am I going to not be their friend? No, I'm not someone's friend because of the times that they run. But then when I apply it to me, I think, oh, people are going to think badly of me. You know, you don't apply the same criteria to other people that you wouldn't apply to yourself. And I think, as you said, people care about your time because they care about you and they know that you care. So if I'm really trying to get a certain goal and they care about me because they like me as a person, they're going to want me to get that goal. And if they don't, they're not going to think less of me. They're going to support me. And if they're judgy, then they're not like really a friend anyway. There's always going to be people that are judgy
True.
and unsupportive, and that's just the way life is.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And it's a big life lesson to learn. And it's not just a lesson for running, it's a lesson for everything. Are you trying to become a PhD? Are you trying to become, you know, the head of a department at, you know, in education? You trying to move up the corporate ladder in business and become a managing director? You're going to have friends in your life who are your real friends, who are going to be super excited for you or Greg when you accomplish your goals and you do what you're setting out for, trying to chase down big things. And there's going to be other people in your life that are just not going to be happy. And that's the truth. They're the ones who are around you, but they're not really your friends. They're not enemies, but you know, they're really not all that excited for you, me, or anybody else when we're doing well. And that's why I love David Goggins so much, because Goggins talks about it all the time. He sees it the way I see it. A lot of people out there are very happy if you fail and you come right back down into that pit with everyone else that failed, versus the people who didn't fail and didn't fall back into that pit and kept going and pushed onward. So I know, you know, look, I'm all about, I can handle the language and all the cuss words, because it's all me. I mean, that's the way I am. And I could speak like a sailor with the best of them, but I just believe that that's true. It's true for a lot of people. But you gotta be directing your energies and your efforts about what's important to you. And it might even be incredibly important to you and not important to Greg, or vice versa. Maybe something super crazy important to him and not as important to you. The important thing is that you guys support each other, and, you know, you just realize this is something for you that you got to just, you know, keep chasing it. So keep going with that. I like it.
Yeah.
And how does this, all of these experiences, all of these learnings, um, and you start to get, so now it's a three, what did you run in Chicago?
348.
348.
Yeah.
So how close are you at this point to, achieving your BQ dream and making that happen? How close are you in the journey at that point?
Yeah. So at that point, so the time is still 340. And just what's interesting about my age is that it's always been 340 whenever whenever I would normally get an extra 5 minutes for aging up. Well, so does the Boston Standard drop. So it's, I think there was 1 year where I could have gotten away with a 345, but that was just 1 year. So anyway, so I ran this 348 in Chicago. And this was once again 2013, but my PR from 2009, gosh, what's the math on that? Like 4 years was a 351. So 4 years of all these cycles and all this training. And I was able to shave, in that time period, just like 3 minutes off, due to all of the anxiety that I was dealing with during those years. So then, now that I sort of have freed myself of this, I was able to go into races a lot more relaxed. And I am trying to think of what the next one was after Chicago. I think it was, okay, so then it was the spring of 2014, and I ran the Mississauga Marathon in Canada. And I still had that goal of 340, but I was a lot more chill about it. I was just like, now I just would like to set a PR of any kind. And one of the sports things my sports psychologist told me is that you don't have to qualify for Boston at your next marathon. This can be a lifelong goal. You have years and years ahead of you. That's why you see runners 50, 60, don't feel like you have to do it tomorrow. And so that kind of took a burden off. So I said, okay, it would be great to BQ. But I think, I'd have a lot less anxiety if my goal is, to PR. And then I had this whole list of process goals, like, stay strong, do this with your fueling, all that. And so then I was able to run a 343, which was a nice PR within just, the next season, just by being relaxed. And I was probably, I was in better shape than I was in Chicago. But then I was like, okay, I can do a 343. I'm really close now. So instead of trying to like take off this big, 10, 11 minute chunk, it was much easier to kind of step down into it. So now that I was in 343, I was really in striking distance of it. So then in the fall, I actually decided to hire a coach as well, because now that I had the mental skills, I felt like I really needed to make sure that my training was individualized to me and that I wasn't making any mistakes there. So I figured if I have a coach, I have a personalized training plan, I know I'm doing the training right, I've got the mental skills, then all I need is like a good weather day and things should be good to go. And so that happened the very next marathon I ran in 2014, Columbus. I ran a 340.00. Right on the
Oh
dot.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's
It was
you
very
you
poetic.
were you were probably like flooring it with everything you had coming towards that finish line.
Oh, I was, and it was crowded. I was weaving through people, and I'm like, "You're in the way of my BQ. Get out of my BQ way!" I was running like a mad woman.
Yeah.
And then the crazy thing is, you cross the finish line, you stop your Garmin, and you don't know exactly when you started it. Exactly, you
Of
don't know
course.
second. And so it said like 340 in 1 second. So I was like, I don't know. I mean, did I BQ? Did I not BQ? And so I was like just dying to get back to the hotel where I had my phone where I could like look up the results. And of course I was like in pain. So I'm trying to get there as quickly as possible. My hip's hurting. And then I get back to the hotel and I get my phone. I'm like, okay, the moment of truth. And it was 340.00. And I'm like, I just like jumped up and down. It was my first BQ.
Wow. That is so cool. And for people that don't realize like how different it was racing just a few years back, even, like I grew up in the era where the chip timing was developed in like the 1996 Boston, the 100th Boston. We're coming up on 125th. And they didn't even use your chip time. They gave you a chip, but it didn't matter. So if Elizabeth, if you started in the second or the third wave in Boston or in another race, it was like tough luck. The time was the start time, like the official time. So much has changed in racing. So you're going back, trying to hobble back to your hotel and get back, and you're in suspense, and then you put the phone on, and then you finally see it, and that's got to be a huge emotional, like you had been like so stoked for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then and my mom said, you got it on the nose. I was kind of like, oh, I would have kind of liked a little buffer. But then she was like, she's right. I did it perfectly. I have no buffer, but like, this is my first BQ and it's very poetic. It's a beautiful, perfect BQ. Right on the nose. And I knew it wasn't enough because now we're in 2014. So you need to have a little cushion.
Correct.
But I didn't care. Like, once again, little baby steps. First, you get a 343, which brings you closer to 340. Then you get the BQ without a lot of cushion that doesn't get you in. And then you get the BQ that does get you in. So you just take little steps to get there.
Yeah, well, that's super good advice. And we definitely have to get into Boston Bound, your book, and all, and the kind of advice that you have in your book. But yeah, it is a gradual process. Fitness and building fitness and becoming aerobically strong and developing your aerobic capacity. This stuff takes years and years to develop. It takes years of running your basic aerobic strength runs at the right pace. It's not trying to beat your training partner. It's not trying to run fast on your easy days or on your recovery days. It's about running at the right paces on those easier days. And then when it comes time for the hard days, whether it's a tempo run, a fartlek run, a long run with pace work, that's when the damn grind begins. And that's when you got to be able to get after it and, give it everything you got. And that builds the fitness gains over time. But yeah, I mean, you've been attacking it. And as you talked about with your therapist, like building like process goals, race goals, that's important stuff because so many people get really fit. And, you have the psychological side, the anxiety component, but other people don't have the anxiety component. They're just not paying any attention to their fueling, or they're not paying any attention to what their race strategy is. They're just going to literally get out there and they're going to run and they're not going to put any thought into it. And all of those things can submarine all of your fitness. It can take away a day that could be special. So now you have a coach. So you're working with McMillan Running, right? At that point, you have somebody who's writing your plans and doing that. You're getting the psychological piece, the mental piece under control. You're getting your fueling together. You're getting like specific workouts and you're developing it over time. So what are some of the next steps for you in the evolution?
Yeah. So next steps, I do just want to hit on something you said briefly before we go forward, is that, you can't compare yourself to other people. So one of the things that would always just bother the crap out of me before I was working with the sports psychologist was when someone would run a BQ on their first marathon or their second marathon, or when someone would say, oh, you're a marathon runner, have you done Boston? As if like that was the be all end all. It didn't matter if you'd done a million marathons. If you haven't done Boston, you're not a real runner. And so those two things would just bother the crap out of me. But someone's, like, for me, my first marathon was a 4:46. Someone else's, theirs could be a 3:40 just because they have different genetics. And genetics does play a big role in it. Some person, their first marathon could be 5 hour, 30 minutes. It's just, you kind of got to go with what you're dealt with. And it's all about maximizing your own potential. And so, and I had to sort of rely on that mental skill with my most recent marathon, where it's like, well, for me, running something like, a 3:10 or 3:09 might be like my lifetime absolute fastest, but for someone else, their lifetime fastest might be at 2:50. So I can't compare, my time to theirs. So you just have to really, and I know it's just so hard with all the social media and the Instagram to like not compare yourself, but you really have to be very diligent about not falling into that comparison trap, because once you do, it will just go nowhere good.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. It's sound advice, because by nature, running is an individual sport, but it is a group sport if you've run it in high school or college. And I was a college baseball player, Division I, and I went to JMU. So you went to UVA. So I used to play at UVA and all the schools around there and the Southern schools. And I really enjoyed that part of the country and really, really liked it. But running, it's an individual sport for sure, but it definitely has community and team elements. And when you run for a team, and it's not a team. I mean, Greg's McMillan Performance and all that, and the coaching group. I mean, you're kind of a team, but you're really not a team. I mean, you might wear singlets, and you could have a team. You could register for Boston as a team. You could have a Masters team and whatnot. But it's not like my team is Central Park Track Club. Like that's an actual like specific running team. And I'm sure in Northern Virginia, you probably have loads of teams. And I don't know if you actually run for one or you just, you wear your McMillan gear from what I see, on your posts. But at the end of the day, it's your running, it's your fitness. And, even, your own husband, like, whatever, you can have fun rivalries with your husband, sibling rivalries, friends, whatever, frenemies, age group competitors that you see regularly in like Northern Virginia, DC racing area. But you got to use it to your advantage to make you better. Like, don't let it be, bring you down the other way. Like, oh, wow, Elizabeth beat me again in this race. I suck. I'm not any good. No. That isn't okay. She beat me. She's doing really well. Okay. I got to up my game. I'm going to take her down in the next race, or what can I do? Or is that just not realistic at all? Like, you got to be a fair judge of where you are. Okay. And where are you trying to get to? And the other big thing too, is I think people put every single thing they have, the only thing that matters, you made the point. People say it. Oh, you haven't run Boston. So yes, it makes them feel inferior. It makes them feel like they're not a true quote unquote marathoner. I've got a ton of people who run on my team on Central Park Track Club. They would never run a marathon. Okay. They don't have any interest in running a marathon. They're terrific in the shorter distances and on the track, and they want to run cross country, and they're phenomenal runners. And I think they just hate all of the energy and attention. And I don't blame them. If I were running the mile and 2 mile only, or running cross country only, or running track stuff, and the only thing I ever saw on Facebook or Instagram were all these Boston posts, I'd probably be like, I don't want to read about any of this anymore. So you got to find what is interesting to you, and what do you want to do, and what do you want to accomplish? And that's what you have to focus on.
Yeah. And, run your own race, focus on what you can control. You can't control what someone else runs. So just really, I mean, yes, you do want to kind of fuel off of, that competition. And when you're in a race and there's someone nearby, and that can help you run faster because that's motivating to you, that's good. But you don't want to, maybe in mile 2 of a marathon, try to keep up with someone like that. And maybe in mile 25 you do. So you just have to have that. This goes back to the strategy.
Definitely. So we're at 340. So you're there, but you're not there yet. Although, and again, I think that's just sound words that you said there. It's really good, and it's sage advice. Like, people do not celebrate their wins. It's one of the things that drives me crazy. And I think you also mentioned it, maybe 10, 15 minutes back. We are great runners as a whole. We're great at giving advice to other runners. I think you need a day off, Elizabeth. I think you'd be better off to just take a rest day. You'll come back and you'll be fresh. Or don't worry about it. It was so hot today. You don't handle heat or humidity as well as me. That's probably why you struggled today. But for our own selves, we're like, man, I ran like shit today. I had nothing. I didn't step up. It was hot. So what? Everybody else handled the heat well. Like, we are really good at giving fair and sound advice to others, but then not giving ourselves a pass or just being positive about what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We need to start loving ourselves and think about, like, would you say this to one of your friends? Absolutely not. So continuing on with the marathon. So we were in the Columbus 2014, that was the 340. So then the next season, which was spring of 2015, I ran this really small race called the BNA Trail Marathon, which is a paved trail in Maryland. Very fast, small race, very well organized. And I wanted something low key. I like, as a runner, I enjoy the big city, big races. I also enjoy the low key, 100, 200 person. I like to have a very vast variety of experiences. So now it's time for a smaller one. So I ran this race in 2015 and still working with the coach. And I think, now that I had the mental skills and now that I had the coach, building on the previous cycle from Columbus, I was able to come away from that race with a 3:35. And that was a 5-minute cushion. So
Yes. So that was your first true, like, was going to get you under, and getting into the 3:35 get you in?
yes, it did. I think the cutoff that year was 3 minutes something, and it was a 4 minute 34:30. So I was, I had to register on the last day because it still was like it was 4:30 or whatever. But I figured, they're going to let a lot of people in from this last day. I should be one of the first people because I'm almost at 5 minutes, and I was pretty confident about it at that point because we'd never seen that you needed a cushion anything more than like 2 minutes or something at that time. They hadn't gone crazy with it. So I was pretty
Like it is
confident.
now.
I know it's like you need like a 10-minute buffer or whatever it is. So it was pretty back in 2015. Like if you had 4 minutes and 30 seconds, you were pretty sure you were going to get in. So I wasn't really losing sleep over it. And I did get in. And since I ran that in the spring of 2015, that qualified me for the spring 2016 Boston, which I registered for. And then it was nice in the fall. That was like the first season in the fall of 2015 that I didn't run a marathon, because I had been running a marathon like every fall, every spring, 2 a year, always trying to get there. And I had finally done it, and I was able to take that fall to focus on the half marathon, which was just a nice change, and I need to do that again. It's easy to become sort of super obsessed with the marathon, but the half marathon has lots to offer too, and if you just really focus on it, you can get a lot better at it. So that fall, my half marathon PR had not budged. I hadn't really focused on it. I'd run a ton of them as like tune-up races, but I was kind of stuck at like 141, 142. I had been stuck at that since 2010, and it was now 2015. And I ran two of them. I ran Columbus and then I ran Richmond, and those are 4 weeks apart. So in Columbus, I hit 137, which was my first sub 140. I broke 140. I hit 137, and then literally 4 weeks later, I ran 135. So
Huge drops. Two in
yes,
a row, two in a row too.
two big ones. Yeah, and so I was at 135, but like for the past 5 years, my PR was a 141, and now all of a sudden it's a 135, which was incredible. So then I kind of moved on to training for Boston in 2016, and on the way there, I ran Shamrock.
Before we do that, I just
Yeah,
want to know, did you were training specifically, obviously, for the halves, because you had
yeah.
said deliberately you weren't going to run a marathon that year. Did you do anything unique or different in that cycle, do you think? Because that's like 6 minutes, which is big and it's fantastic. And it's advice I try to give to people all the time, which might seem hypocritical for me, the guy who runs every major and like every marathon and then ultras too. But you do. I'm 60. I've done so many things in running, so I can almost kind of do almost anything I want at this point. What am I going to do at this point? I'm not going to break myself, and I'm having the time of my life meeting fun people like you around at all these races. But changing the direction of your training, changing a cycle or even two or even three, and putting focus way more on speed or on track or on cross country or just a different system of the body can yield good results. I don't want to just slip through there and just not at least see if there was anything unique
Yeah,
you did.
definitely. Instead of the long runs, the 20 milers, I think the longest run he had me do was 2 hours. We do them by time. 2 hours at that point was about a 14 miler. So that was the longest I would run, but he would have me doing, half marathon pace miles. In those long runs, he had me doing a lot more speed work. I was still running a pretty good volume. But when I went to those races, I didn't have the fatigue of all those long runs, because usually when I was doing a half marathon, it was kind of as a tune-up. So I really focused on, and also I forgot to mention that summer of 2015, I did like a 5K extravaganza. I was like, now that I've qualified for Boston, I'm just going to be all about 5Ks. It's hot. I just want to do a ton of these. So I was running like 5K every 2 or 3 weeks. And that really helped get my speed up. By the end of that, I had like totally, wasn't setting PRs because it was the summer, but I was setting like hot weather, like summer PRs. And so I knew that I had gained a lot of speed. So then I built on that speed in that fall that I had gained in 5K training, and built on that some endurance to then bring that to the half marathon.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, it's logical. It makes sense. But there's a lot of people out there that fall into what I call like the marathon trap, where they're doing 3, maybe even 4 a year. And there are people, Gene Dykes, I just happen to have one of those kind of bodies like Gene's, where I can recover really quickly and I can run marathon pace and stay consistent. And it's adapting over many, many, many years of running. But other people, they're trying to do that because they see their friends doing that, going back to, again, what he's doing or what she's doing. And you know what? That's not in your best interest. If your coach is telling you to do that and you have a coach, great. If you don't have a coach, I highly recommend you get one. I don't need one at this point because I know what I'm doing. I how to take care of myself and prepare myself if I'm trying to build up for one big race or build up to a couple like later in a year. But for people that don't understand periodization and mileage and what kind of workouts they should be doing and learning more about nutrition and also like prehab and strength stuff, it just pays such dividends and benefits to work with somebody who understands like what are your goals and like what are you trying to accomplish, because otherwise you're going to get stuck. And you're right, in the beginning those PRs come easy, man. I don't care what times you came into from, whether it's 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 something, whatever, you're going to drop, and you're going to drop a lot. And then at some point it doesn't happen anymore. And it's like, oh, what do we do now? So you made changes. You changed up your training philosophy. You did a ton of 5Ks in the summer heat, which is always good. Yeah, maybe you're not going to run your fastest 5K in the summer because of the heat, but it's great training, man. It's high heart rate. It's fast turnover. You're gunning it. You're cranking it. And then you're doing speed work in a half marathon workout. You know, you're running half marathon pace miles, maybe even faster, all good things that lead to what's going to no doubt pay dividends in the marathon. So take it from there.
Yeah, so taking from there, so then while we're on the topic of halves, I ran the Shamrock half in Virginia Beach as my tune-up. I traditionally like to run a half tune-up before full, and this race was, I think, 6 weeks before Boston, and the weather was like torrential downpour, high winds. One of those really, really nasty storms was coming through. It was about 47 degrees, and no one expected to PR. I didn't expect a PR. I mean, I just run this massive PR of 135. So I kind of just tossed that goal out of the window, and I was like, I'm just going to try to just run by feel. And this is one example of where, as you said earlier, your strategy is really important. So I found out which direction the wind was going, and I made sure that during those miles I stayed in a pack, like so that I wouldn't have to deal with the wind, so I could kind of draft. And then once I shifted direction and the wind was going to be at my back, I could get out of that pack. And I ended up running another PR at 2 minutes, 133, which was just like, I could not even believe it. I was like one of the only people that I knew that PR'd that day. No one could believe it. This is not PR weather. But I was getting so fit, and I was just getting so used to, like, I was getting so good at racing the half and knowing what it should feel like and having that strategy. And that was just one of those amazing moments. And it also kind of I was almost teary-eyed at the end because I had run that same Shamrock half a few years back before I had resolved all my mental issues, and it was windy and I really wanted a PR, but I didn't get a PR, and because the wind slowed me down, and I was really upset about it. And here I was setting this massive PR, like in the wind, in the rain, and it was just like, look how far I've come. So
Yeah.
that was a great moment. So then Boston came, Boston 2016, which was my first. And lo and behold, it was amazing spectator weather, but not great racing weather.
Beach weather.
Beach weather.
Yeah.
It was 70 at the start. Just standing around, people were like
Broiling.
Yes. And
Where's the sunscreen?
totally. And one of the things though, like, as you know, everybody's unique, and you know, heat is hard on everyone, and I'm not trying to say that it's not, but I find that I particularly, for me, it's like a double whammy. And I know that, you know, local runners who I would maybe be about the same pace as in the cold races, when it's a hot race, they're going to always outperform me. I'm always going to suffer a lot more than most people. It's just, I've been like that since my days of dance. When I was a dancer, I'd always end up with this like bright red face. Everyone would ask if I was okay. I've just always been really like hot when I exercise, and my body is not great at cooling itself down. So that's always been kind of a disadvantage. Or even when the race is in the high 50s, low 60s, everyone's like, that's perfect weather. Didn't affect me. And like for me, that was another, kind of issue I had to deal with is, I would say, oh, I didn't run well and I'm blaming the weather, but it was 59 degrees and no one else was blaming the weather because everyone else thought it was perfect, but not for me. I needed, for me to have it not impact me, I need to be like 50 or below. So anyway, but I didn't care that it was warm because my attitude now was, this is Boston. This is what I had been working for like 8-9 years now. And I have had blood and sweat and tears for this moment. And I'm not going to rob myself of the joy because it's hot and because I'm going to struggle physically. I know I'm going to struggle physically. I know it's going to be difficult, but gosh damn it, if I don't enjoy every single second of that race, I'm robbing myself of everything that I've worked for. And I knew this was it. This was my moment, and I was going to run the entire race with a smile on my face, no matter how hard it was with the heat. And it was hard. I ran 3:48, and I was probably in shape for like 3:30. I think I would have just run like a 1:33 half a few weeks before, so I was thinking maybe I could do a 3:30, maybe faster. But that didn't happen. It was hot. I ended up in the medical tent with hyponatremia, not having taken in enough electrolytes, because I just kept drinking so much water. Didn't balance it out right. Ended up sort of at the finish line, people asking me if I was okay, and me thinking in my mind I was okay, but not being able to tell them I was okay. So anyway, but once again, I ended up in the medical tent. It was fine. I took one of their little salt solution soup things, hung out there for a while, ultimately met back up with Greg, and everything was fine. But it was an amazing experience. I will never forget my first Boston and how happy I was, and just the whole weekend. It's not just about the race. With Boston, it's about the experience. It's about getting up there. Like, I put that Boston jacket on for the very first time. I had ordered it online, but I didn't wear it. Everyone has kind of like their different rules about when they wear the jacket. So for me, I said, well, I've officially made it to Boston Marathon weekend. I now can wear the jacket on the plane to Boston. So everyone who else is on this plane, we all know that we're all kind of running this marathon. So I put that jacket on. I was so happy. Got on that plane, wore the jacket on the plane, and the whole weekend was just like beaming. Spent way too much money at the expo. I was just grabbing, I want this, I want this. I wasn't even trying stuff on. I mean, because I was like, I don't know when I'm going to be back here. And I just bought everything in sight. And I'm thinking, look, I hadn't run this race ever. So I have years of savings from not having been at this expo, which justified it. So I did that. And I met up with, Boston is another thing, people have made friends with other runners through Facebook groups and other forms of social media. And there's so much going on that weekend where you can meet up with the people that you only have known online. I met up and I met my coach, Andrew Limoncello. I met him in person for the first time. I met Greg McMillan in person for the first time. We had a group run. I didn't even talk about the book, but I was about to release the book. No one really knew about the book at that point. But I anyway, participated in all these kind of like side events that just make the weekend. And then the race itself is like the grand finale. It just builds and builds and builds with all these events and the expo and all of the hype. And the city, all the people that live there, they love the runners. They're so welcoming. Many cities, there's a marathon going on. The people who live there, they don't know, they don't care. Maybe they're annoyed that the roads are going to be, taken up. But when you run Boston, it's different. It's different than New York. It's different than Chicago. It's different than Columbus, because everyone knows it's Marathon Monday in that city. Everyone is supportive, and the whole city celebrates it, versus these kind of other marathon runners where it's just, that's, the marathon's happening.
That's so well said, because it's an event. It really is an event. I mean, we're coming up on the 125th, and I'm blessed to have run in the 100th. And for people that like the history of Boston and enjoy that kind of stuff, they'd never had a field size of larger than maybe 10,000, Elizabeth, and decided to celebrate the 100th to make it so special. They were going to have a lottery. Like, lotteries didn't exist back then. They're very common now. I mean, London, like, I don't know how many people go in the London lottery, and it's like winning a real lottery to get in London if you're not a London resident and you can't do a time qualifier. So it is remarkably special. And this was the first time ever that runners were staged, that there were that many. I think the largest field size at that point was 12,000 or 14,000. There were 40,000 runners.
Wow, that's
So it's
amazing.
like 4 times more, not just Boston, any race, London, New York, all of them. And, this is back when people were literally going to the bathroom on people's lawns in Hopkinton, but also people would invite you in if you wanted to go to the bathroom. It wasn't like it is now where things are very different. People are out there on the lawn saying hi in the morning as we're going down to make our ways to our crowd. But my God, things were different. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, it was just amazing. And 1995 was my first time, being up there, and for the 99th. And you're right. Everything about it is different, from racing on a Monday, the Red Sox playing a day game. Like, the city is shut down. It's a party. I mean, it is a party from the morning when you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it is, if you even sleep, to get out to Hopkinton from the race. Fenway's going bananas because the game is on. The bars are going wild all day. And you get the weekend to kind of hang out and meet all these people, like you said, who you've known from either Facebook or Instagram, and you roll up and you spend way too much money. You're talking about how much money you spend. I stopped tracking a long time ago how much money I spend at these expos, man. I just melt all my cards as soon as I roll in. I'm like, this, that. Okay. And you roll out of there and you like, don't even remember what you spent it on or why, or, gifts for my son and other friends. I got to get this person a shirt or that person a hat, and different things. And, so cool for you. But what I love the most, and what I'm proud of you for doing, is you knew going in, that was not the conditions for you. We all have our kryptonite. We all have something that we struggle with. And some of us, really, it's wind or it's cold or it's heat, whatever it is. So you knew that going in, but I'm just so happy that you didn't allow that to take over and wreck your first experience, because there are people who've done just that, because the only thing in the world they were focused on is, what am I going to run in my first Boston? I have to run as fast as I've run somewhere else. And then they had the worst experience, as opposed to, in your case, where you got all of it. You sucked the marrow out of it. You got the whole full experience. And I'm just really happy that you did.
And I kind of, part of me wanted to set sort of a low bar. It's the first one. So it just made it easier to go back and run faster. And, to now you have this other goal, like, I want to run every time I run Boston, I want it to be faster. Obviously that cannot continue, but if you run a really slow course Boston, it makes it all the easier to PR it the second time.
So there's the strategy: run slower in your first one, and you're automatically going to keep improving, unless you get to a certain age in life where you just can't get faster anymore. But, we're still giving it hell. We're still out there running, and I've got friends of mine who've run crazy amounts of Bostons. I'm only on maybe like my 8th or my 9th. I've got friends who've run 20 or 25, and just completely crazy numbers
a lot.
and experience. Yeah, it is a lot. And I'm thrilled. I had a huge gap in there where I was coaching my son's sports teams for years and years and years, and just decided I was going to step off of running for it was 9 years. It was a 9-year break. And I don't regret it at all, because I got to be a part of all of those teams with him, all those travel baseball teams, and getting him ready for high school. And then he decided, he wanted to run, and, to get him ready to run cross country when he had never run before. And his mom was a terrific runner. I used to coach his mom. She's a 2:53 marathoner. And we met through running, and just amazing experiences. So, and they're lifelong experiences. I mean, I'm 60 and I'm still doing it. And I still have friends that I met up there when I was 35 years old. That's 25 years of running. And not everyone from my peer group is still running. Some of them aren't running anymore. They can't run anymore. Maybe they're just not had knee replacements, hip replacements, 100 things, or they just lost the drive. I think one of the things people struggle with as they get older is if they can't run the same times. And I think, like, psychologically, like, you figured this huge piece out about yourself. I figured out for myself, I'm never going to run a 2:41 like I ran in Boston in 1996, but there's age graded times. Those age graded times count. They mean something. They're not fake. It's runners from around the world based on how old you are running like the best time at any of those distances, a mile, 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles. And if you can run an 80% age grade time, which is always my goal, that's a nationally ranked time. And I run a lot of 80% age graded times. Those times, it will tell you if it's a marathon. Okay, this is a 2:36 marathon. Well, my marathon PR is 2:40. Now, does that mean I think it's better than my PR? Maybe not, but it does give me a lot of pride if that table is real and it's meaningful. Like, hey, this is something. So, but other people are like, well, if I can't run the same time I ran, 20 years ago, I don't want to run. I'm like, okay, whatever. To me, you're missing out because it's special. And I think you had to go through so much to get there. And then when you did, you were super, super excited. So when did you decide, that you were going to write Boston Bound, and like what led you to write the book, and, talk a little about how that all came to be?
Yeah. So uh, I had wanted to write a book since I was like, could pick up a pen since I was like 8 years old. I've always been an avid writer. And I've had, when I was a kid, I would be prolific with short stories. And in college, I majored in English. And in my professional career, I started out in marketing communications, writing website copy and press releases and product brochures. And that's how I got into marketing, was because there's a lot of writing involved. And it's somewhat creative when you're trying to sell something. So as we all know in marketing, a little bit of truth and creativity. So writing has always been a huge passion of mine. And I started a blog in 2005, like the MySpace blog. And then I transitioned the MySpace blog onto a normal blogging platform as MySpace was going away in like 2009 timeframe. And the blog was exclusively about running and running focused, and all my training and racing and thoughts and everything. And sometimes it would include some other personal things, but mostly focused on running. And um, this desire to write a book, kind of, my childhood dream, it was going to be like a novel, just kind of fell by the wayside. You grow up, you get a job, you get involved in things, and you just don't do it. But I've always known still, that I always thought, well, when I retire and have a full-time job, then I'll write the book. So once I went through this experience, and I truly, when it was it wasn't just for running, it was a whole personality, like transformation and transplant. Like I literally feel like a different person than I was, now that I'm more confident. I don't care what people think. And this is in all areas of my life. I truly love myself. I have all these mental skills. I'm more confident. I really felt like I wanted to share that with other people. I really felt like I could help other people with that. And I thought that I could write out all of my experiences. And I had the blog documenting kind of everything I went through with the sports psychologist in detail, everything we talked about. And so I had it all in my head. I had it written in my head, parts of it written in the blog. Greg really pushed me to make it a reality. He's like, go sit down and write. Like I said, oh, maybe I'll write a book. He really kind of pushed me to do it. And we were on a cruise in the summer of 2015, sort of after I BQ'd. He's like, now that you've BQ'd, you have it, like, you have some time now. You're not running any full marathons. You have some time this fall to really focus on it. When we get back from this cruise, to really start working on it. And I did. And every weekend I took a dedicated amount of time, starting in, I guess that was like August of 2015. I would spend, several hours each weekend, kind of writing this book, and sometimes in the evenings as well. And it came together, and I finished it. I wanted the last chapter to be my experience of running the 2016. So I had the whole thing written except for that last chapter by, I want to say like March or April. So it took me like 6-7 months to write. And then I finally was able to write that last chapter, and then I knew the book was ready. It was ready to go publish. And so then it was published in May, just like 4 weeks after that Boston Marathon. Was published pretty quickly. And I hadn't really, at that point, I'd had my blog. My blog had like an okay following, like not nearly as many. It wasn't like prominent. I wasn't like getting like brands coming to me to review things. It was just, I could tell from the analytics that it was getting a decent amount of views. I mean, I had a lot of friends that were runners. I would post them on Facebook. I didn't have an Instagram following. In fact, I had, 400, 500 people on Instagram. And I started trying to build up a presence on Instagram in around the time of the Boston Marathon, because I knew this book was coming out. So around April of 2016, I started building a following by, using, and I'm in marketing, so I know how to use social media really well. I just never had a reason to do it for myself. So since I already knew how to use social media, I started growing that following with all the techniques with hashtags and the content and photo and like everything that you do to grow your following. And this was back when Instagram was sort of younger and it was easy to grow the following really quickly. And so it just, all these followers started coming, and I was getting like 300, 400, 500 followers a week. And so by the time the book came out, I had like several thousand followers. And then when the book came out, people started hearing about it, and I started just getting even more followers. And when I put the book out there, I did not have any expectations for its success. I did not expect it to like be a moneymaker. That was kind of the last thing on my list. It was kind of a litmus. It was kind of I had a spreadsheet of like all my expenses of it. And then all of the money that I would make. And if it evened out, if I was a net zero, I thought I'd be in a good spot if I sold enough to make up for the costs of it. So the goal was definitely not to make money. The goal was to get that story out there and get people reading it and relating it and helping people so that they were experiencing race anxiety, or not even race anxiety, any kind of mental barrier, because these lessons, as we've said, are applicable to many areas of life. So for example, this guy read it and said that he applied it to getting a promotion. He was having these feelings because he hadn't gotten a promotion in 3 years. And he said that the book really helped him with that. I've gotten so many emails and direct messages on people saying that it's helped them in many other areas of life. So anyway, I had no expectations. I published it. I hadn't really told many people in advance I was going to publish it. I'd only let a few people read the manuscript. My mom is a professional editor, so she edited it for me. Thank you, Mom. So I was lucky to have that. And so my friends were the first people that bought it, and then I guess word just got out. I had this Instagram following, and the sales just like exploded. Way more, and I would look and see the sales, and I couldn't believe it. And the feedback I was getting was like, this book changed my life, or someone said it was their favorite book, or people were like highlighting it and taking notes in it. And this is just not at all. I thought, if it helped one person, it was worth it. It was just beyond my wildest dreams or imagination how well it was received. And now I go to races, or I was like at a chess tournament a few weekends ago, and someone comes up to me and he says, "I've read your book." It's randomly. So it's been a crazy ride, and it's just been amazing. I do plan to write another book at some point. I'm not ready now. I think I'll know when I'm ready and what it will be about. But this book has now been out for almost 5 years, and it's still selling every day. It's amazing. And so I'm just so grateful that I've had this opportunity to share my story and to help like so many other people with it.
What an amazing experience. You're analytical, you set these goals, and a kind of person like that, it's like, it's very simple things. Like, at this point, you're just like, just to break even or to kind of cover your costs or whatever. But, it was so cathartic for you to write the book. I mean, to go through all of these experiences that you'd had, and knowing that the odds are there's probably a lot of other people. And, as we've covered in detail in this episode, all of these things are applicable for very, very many different avenues and facets of life. They just are. And I always tell people all the time that runners are the best people because we're disciplined, we're hard workers, we're determined, We literally never give up. We will keep going. We'll keep persevering. And in your case, yeah, you needed some help to kind of get to the bottom of a lot of those things. But yeah, after that, with coaching, with hard work, and continuing to just hammer away, you got there. You achieved your dream. And good job by Greg pushing you to, to get after it, because we all need somebody like that in our life, because we can always just say, you know what? I'm going to start this podcast soon. It's so funny when you're saying that. My son called me on my podcast because I kept putting it out there that I was going to do it soon. And he said, Dad, what's soon? You said you were going to do this. You've been on all these shows. You know you want to do a podcast. When are you going to actually do the podcast? So, we need somebody in our life like that we love and whose opinion we value, to just kind of not necessarily call us on it, but just make you aware enough, like, okay, it's time now. So you had that opening, you're on a cruise, and you started like allocating a certain amount of time. You got it done. Now, did you self-publish, or did you go through a publisher?
Yeah, I self-published because I'm a professional marketer, and really what a publisher does is they market the book. And then they take, I don't know, like 90% of the money goes to them, and you get maybe like 50 cents per book sold. So when you self-publish, you still you publish through the Amazon. I use the Amazon self-publishing, so I still don't get the whole thing, but I get way more than like the 5% I'd get from self-publishing. But I knew as a professional marketer, I knew how to market it through social media, through I got some press coverage. It was in Competitor magazine. I knew how to earn that press coverage. I knew what the podcasts were, and how at the time when it was launching, how to get the word out. So I think in the end, I don't know that if I had gone through a publisher, if they would have been able to do much more for me. I mean, maybe they could have had more book signings or things like that. But I was able to do book signings locally, and the folks who made the Boston documentary, they invited me to their preview at the Boston Marathon 2018 to sign books there. So I've gotten these opportunities through various avenues. So I just attacked it through all the various channels that I would normally market a business through, and it really worked out. So I mean, if someone's trying to publish a book, I would say, like, it's marketing it. Writing the book is like just one small part of it. Like, marketing it is huge. So if you know how to do that, then self-publish. If not, then you might want to try to get a publisher or learn how to market.
Such good advice. And, like, sometimes it's a huge success. It's helped so many people, and that's wonderful. But even if it wasn't, even if you just did it because you wanted to put it down on paper, you wanted to put your story down, your struggles, and you wanted to just document all that you had been through, and not a single person had bought the book, it still would have been a win. It still would have been something amazing, and that you fulfilled it. And because you said you had aspirations to write and to write a book since you were little, but to have it come out and be so successful and present these opportunities for you to speak and to meet other runners, but way more importantly, to just help other people and have them acknowledge that, it's got to feel like pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, it really does. And every time I get a message, or every time I see someone who says that the book has like helped them, it just makes me feel really, really great inside. And for me, it's just sort of a coming together of all my passions. So I love running, I love writing, I love marketing, and like all those things to kind of come together in this book project.
Yeah, it's a culmination of all of those areas that are strengths of yours and things that you really identify with. One question, there it is. There it is on the screen, Boston Marathon. Well, we'll get a screenshot of that for when we publish the podcast and we put it out there and we do some promotion. That's a great shot. So I'll get a frame of that from the Zoom grab. We'll get that involved, and we'll have links to the book and to your blog page, your web page, all of that good stuff. But one thing I always ask people, and I think it's super, super important, and maybe in your story, did you have a mentor somewhere in high school or college that really noticed that you had skill in writing and maybe influenced your writing in any way, maybe a teacher, a professor, or somebody where you connected with them and realized, hey, I'm really good at this. This is something I'm going to continue to pursue, because it's obviously come full circle for you.
I wouldn't necessarily say a teacher. I mean, I did get good grades, and whenever I wrote a paper, it was almost always an A. But I didn't really necessarily have a mentor or someone in college. I would say I got a lot of good sort of feedback from bosses that I've had in various jobs that I've held, where someone will see something that I wrote, and they would say, "Wow, this is really great," especially in marketing writing that was kind of new to me. So I've had a lot of kind of encouragement and support that way. I mean, no one person really sticks out. I mean, my parents are always very, very supportive of my writing, Greg as well. But it's just something that I think I just have a natural gift for it, because I have, since I literally learned how to write, I've just been writing stories and writing so much that it's just a sort of a passion of mine.
Yeah, good stuff. And you had your mom to edit the book, so that was a huge bonus too, right?
Yeah.
Keep it in the family.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're a very driven person. Nobody keeps knocking on a door for something that long before banging it down without being driven and really getting after it. So, where do you think that comes from in your life? Does it come from one of your parents or something specific? What do you think?
I don't really know what I attribute to. That's a good question. I just, when I try to think back to the youngest memory I have of trying to achieve something, I remember in second grade there was these reading things, and they were different colors, and like level 1 was red, level 2 was blue, and it was self-paced, and there were just, you could just do it whatever. It was part of the classroom, and the other kids would go do recess or they would play, and I would go read these things, and I was going to be the first one to get to like the level 7 brown, and I was like just dedicated. And this is second grade, and I just like tore through all this reading material, and then when I got there, everyone else was still like on level 1 or 2, and I just felt so good about that.
Love it.
So,
That's a
I mean, I think it's just innate in me. I don't really know if it comes from anywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't have to, but it's a great example, because at a super young age, that was as a poignant example as you could possibly give. We had something on the schoolyard that I remember too. We had something called the bookmobile, and it was crazy. They don't have things like that anymore. I wish they did, but it was just basically like a bookmobile, like a library, like a roving library, and you basically would get stars for reading the book and then writing a comprehension report, and same kind of thing. I was always like, man, I'm just gonna blow through this entire list. I'm just gonna like rip and be like, there's no way you read this book. I'm like, I read this book, and I would write, because you had to write a little comprehension piece on it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I had that same kind of spirit
Yeah.
in me. And it's not, it doesn't just apply to athletics, it applies to all areas of our life. So
Absolutely.
I have to say, it's been super fun getting to know you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate the stories you shared and everything about your running journey, your marathoning journey, writing your book, how that's helped so many other people. And before we roll out of here, I just want to make sure if there's anything big, in your plans for 2021 or anything that we haven't gotten to today, that I give you a chance to share that with everybody.
No, I mean, I just really hope I plan to run Boston in 2022. I did 2016, and then I did 2018, and I kind of like doing it every other year, just because it sort of, I felt like if I did it every year, it would maybe sort of lose its excitement. And so I do it the plan is to do it every 2 years, as long as I'm able to continue qualifying. And so I did the virtual. I ran it in 2018 in that horrible storm, but I'm good in rain and wind. So I ran a 3:26 in that weather, which most people would say, oh, 2016 hot weather was better. But once again, I do better when I'm freezing. So that was great weather for me. And so I ran the 2018, and then I ran the 2020 virtual. And then I plan to run again in 22. Hopefully they have it on Patriots Day, and hopefully it's in April. Hopefully it's the normal field size. Fingers crossed, because that is my plan.
I think that that's probably very likely to happen. I think that there's of the majors, I think Berlin is definitely in peril or could be in peril. I think Tokyo, I don't see it happening. I'm registered. I think London will 100% happen. I think New York will 100% happen. And I think Boston will 100% happen. Chicago, I think they're cutting field size, and that'll probably will happen also. But I do think you're right. I think 2022, we have a really good chance for things to get back on their normal calendared schedule, and the race is to become more of what we're accustomed to. Certainly that's something to be hopeful for, because right now it doesn't feel at all like the racing that we're accustomed to when we show up. And although it's still a fun experience to be able to see your friends and you can warm up together, but when you get to the starting line, having a mask on or a buff or other things and going through aid stations and finishing and doing all this, it's necessary because we all have to look out for each other and keep ourselves healthy and make it through this crazy time we're in. But I just look forward to being able to go to real races again and just walk up and hug people, because that's my thing, man. I like seeing people and giving them a hug and being like, hey, what's up? How are you? Missed you. So we have to all look forward to that stuff for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Super fun talking to you.
Likewise.
Best to Greg. I saw him scooting by a couple of times in the
Yeah,
back door
sure.
behind you, going up and down the stairs. So we should have had him come over and say hi. I met you guys on the plane that time coming back from CIM. That
Oh,
was
that was
fun.
fun.
But yeah. But anyway, thanks so much for coming on. And we always sign up the shows telling everybody to keep lacing them up, keep getting out the door, and always remember to stay in the fight.